Today's session is about the Lean Canvas business model and specifically the existing alternatives and problems sections. Last session we looked at our Lean Canvas and we looked at the orange sections on the edges, the customer segments, early adopters, and we talked about that the other edge, the problem and existing alternatives, were the two most important columns to worry about in the beginning. And we call this the leaner canvas, where we just focus on these to start with. And if you remember, we talked about customer segments, keeping them simple, high level, like coffee drinkers, homeowners, and then under early adopters, getting more specific. In the Starbucks case, which we'll look at again, coffee drinkers in Seattle, maybe that are having an issue that have nowhere to go for coffee except brewing it at home. Remember, this is really important, the early adopters. What has changed in their circumstance, their awareness, a bad experience? What job to be done are they looking to fulfill? So now we're going to move to the left side. So after that, we talk about who these customers are, who the early adopters are, their characteristics, and then we want to look at how do they solve these problems now, the existing alternatives, which is our competition. And here we want to think about all of the different ways that the customer solves their current problems. And it doesn't just have to be in the same market or industry. Sometimes we have solutions outside of our industry. Let's take a look at some examples. So existing alternatives, competition, can be direct competitors, which is pretty common. That's what we normally think about when we think about competition. But it can also be indirect competition. So what could that look like? Well, if you're McDonald's, a direct competitor would be Burger King. An indirect competitor, still in the fast food industry, but not selling burgers and fries, would be Papa John's or Domino's. And obviously Domino's and Papa John's would be direct competitors, and vice versa. Their indirect competitors would be McDonald's and Burger King, because it's getting the same job done for you and I as a consumer, quickly satisfying our hunger with easy to purchase fast food. But there's more than just direct and indirect competition. What about substitute products? So a substitute product for any of these, Burger King, McDonald's, pizza places, could be a meal replacement, protein bar, protein drink, anything else you can think of that would be quick and easy. What about adjacent markets, right? Could be caterers, could be restaurants. Even when you think about substitute products not in the food industry, a great example is grass and cement. You would think those are completely different industries, but if we think about, especially in California, our front yards, many people now, because of the water shortage, cost of water, being eco-friendly, is replacing their grass with hardscape, with concrete, with pavers. So taking grass out, now cement is used in place of that, a substitute product to beautify your yard. So we have to think about the job that product is getting done. Let's take a look at McDonald's on our lean canvas. What could this look like if we're McDonald's? Well, just focusing on the existing alternative box, we could say that Burger King would be a direct competitor. We also talked about Domino's being an indirect competitor. So how about a substitute product? Well, one of my favorite is Muscle Milk. I purchase Muscle Milk as a meal replacement. It's fast, you can stop at the gas station, supermarket, grab this, and it does the same job that McDonald's, Burger King, and Domino's do. Satisfies my hunger quickly. What about an adjacent market? Well, that could be catering, just like we already mentioned. Much more involved, maybe higher cost, maybe longer lead times, but again, it's still a competitor, an existing alternative. So what we need to do is think about these existing alternatives and what problems exist with them that you and your startup can solve. And if we go back to our leaner canvas, now over here in box 3, you want to list all those products, service competitors you can think of. Again, direct, indirect, substitute, adjacent. Once you do that, now we want to move to what problems exist with each of those solutions. And we want to be very succinct. We don't want to have more than one bullet per idea. So no commas and ands. I see that a lot. Product A has this problem, comma, and it does this. So separate those. Those are two disparate thoughts, very distinct thoughts that are distinct problems that we want to figure out. Are those problems actually worth solving? Are they the most important problems? What will happen is you'll probably end up with 10, 12 different problems if you have 4 or 5 competitors. We want to then start to focus on how do we know which one's the most important? Because these are just your assumptions. It's a great starting point, but now we have to go out and actually gather evidence. So on your first attempt at your lean canvas, list your existing alternative competitive products, and then one by one, just think about each of those competitive offerings. What is the biggest problem with those offerings? Could be ease of use, not available, no local store, not enough customer service. You get the point. It's not always price. And then list those up here as your top problems for all of the alternatives that you come up with. Remember, new problems worth solving can be discovered by studying how customers use old solutions. And there's always an old way. Sometimes it's do it yourself, whether it's building some custom software or it is building something out of wood because you can't find it correctly. There's always a do-it-yourself approach, and in some instances, that could be your biggest competitor. If we look back at our customer forces model again, this just helps give you a visual that helps remind us of the customer's journey. The customer is down here, before he gets up to this new desired outcome. Something happened as a triggering event, which we talked about for early adopters. And these big boulders are his problems or her problems. What do those existing alternatives have as problems? What problems are they causing that's motivating this consumer to look for something better? Here's our example of Starbucks we'll continue to use throughout the series. We already talked about the customer segments. The green is what Starbucks initially had as their business model, and the red ones are things in the past, maybe 20 plus years that we have come to know Starbucks also to have as their business model. So if we think about moving from early adopters, people who brew coffee at home, coffee lovers in Seattle, to now the existing alternatives, how did they solve those problems? Well, previously, back in the 70s and 80s, it was the supermarket. You would go to the grocery store to get coffee. You had Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's, and you brewed stuff at home. There were no other coffee competitors at the time. But now, in the past, call it 20 years or so, we as consumers know there are other choices. You have Peet's, you have Dutch Bros, and you could list many more. So we want to spend time as a founder, entrepreneur, thinking about each of these 5 listed competitors and what is wrong with each of these. And for Starbucks, we come up with some answers like this. There are few choices for high quality fresh brewed coffee. There was no clean, welcoming place to meet for business besides the office. And there was no place with a cool coffee house vibe. Those were the 3 biggest things that were happening. Now, if we think about even more, again, in the last 20 years, another problem could be going inside takes too long, which we'll get to our solutions to solve these problems in our next video. So your homework now, think about your competitors, the problems with each of these, be very specific and list a bullet for each of those. And then over time, you'll start to refine and prioritize those. Good luck. We'll talk to you soon in the next session.